In the dark shadow of World War II, while armies clashed across continents and cities burned under relentless bombardment, another silent battlefield stretched across the prison camps of Europe and Asia. It was the world of the Allied prisoners of war, soldiers who had laid down their arms yet found themselves trapped in a new kind of torment. Their suffering remains one of the most haunting chapters in human history. Under the iron rule of Nazi Germany, tens of thousands of captured Allied soldiers were marched into barbed wire camps known as stalags and oflags. For British, American, and French prisoners, survival meant enduring freezing barracks, near starvation rations, and the constant threat of disease. Yet their fate, harsh as it was, could not compare to that of the Soviet POWs. Hitler had declared them subhuman, and so the rules of war no longer applied. Millions were left to rot in open-air enclosures without food or shelter. They froze, starved, or were shot where they stood. By the war's end, nearly 3.5 million Soviet soldiers had perished in captivity, one of the largest mass deaths in modern history. As the German war machine began to crumble, the prisoners' nightmare deepened. They were forced into slave labor, digging trenches, repairing railroads, and building weapons for the very enemy they had once fought. Starving men became living skeletons, working until they collapsed. For them, liberation was not victory, it was survival. Half a world away, under the blazing sun of the Pacific, the prisoners of the Imperial Japanese Army faced horrors beyond imagination. Japan's warrior code considered surrender a disgrace, and Allied captives were treated with unimaginable cruelty. On the Bataan Death March, thousands of exhausted American and Filipino soldiers were forced to walk over 60 miles without food or water. Those who stumbled were beaten, bayoneted, or left to die by the roadside. In the jungles of Burma and Thailand, tens of thousands of POWs were driven like animals to build the death railway, a massive line cutting through mountains and disease-ridden swamps. Every sleeper laid beneath the tracks was paid for in human life. Over 16,000 Allied prisoners and more than 200,000 Asian laborers never came home. Inside the secret laboratories of Unit 731, captured soldiers were used as human experiments. Their bodies were dissected without anesthesia, their flesh frozen or burned to test the limits of survival. Airmen who fell into Japanese hands were often tortured for information or executed publicly to satisfy a crowd's thirst for revenge. For many prisoners, death was not the worst fate, it was mercy. Even in fascist Italy, where conditions were comparatively less brutal, Allied captives suffered hunger, isolation, and sickness. But after Italy's collapse in 1943, many were handed over to the Germans, plunging them back into the depths of despair. When the war finally ended in 1945, the gates of the camps opened to reveal a living nightmare. Emaciated men, their eyes sunken and hollow, stumbled into the light. They were free, but forever changed. The scars they carried were not only on their bodies, but in their souls. Many could never speak of what they endured. Others spoke so that the world would never forget. At the Nuremberg and Tokyo war crimes trials, justice was slow, but it came. Commanders, guards, and doctors who had orchestrated the cruelty were finally brought to account. Yet no sentence could erase the pain of those who lived or bring back the millions who never returned. The suffering of the Allied POWs remains a grim reminder of what happens when humanity is stripped away by hatred and power. They were soldiers who fought with courage, but they became victims of a cruelty that defied civilization. Their endurance, their pain, and their silence still echo through history, a solemn warning to every generation that follows.